Rain drummed against the cracked kitchen window, each drop a heartbeat in the silence that had swallowed their home years ago. She crouched beside him, her fingers brushing over the cold, rigid limbs of the man she had loved since she was 20, tracing veins that refused to carry life like they once had. For 5 years, she had lived in this careful rhythm, spooning soup, adjusting blankets, whispering words she hoped would reach him somewhere inside. She barely noticed the clock anymore, the way shadows grew long and heavy across the floor, or the soft padding that had become almost background noise the dog. Tonight, though, he was different. The German shepherd circled the bed, ears flicking, nose twitching. A low whine escaped from his throat, urgent and sharp. He pressed against her knees, eyes wide and unblinking, then darted toward the corner where the faintest smell, the one humans couldn't detect, clung to the air. Her heart thumped in a sudden, strange hope. Something was there, something they had all missed. Rain tapped steadily against the cracked kitchen window, drumming a soft, relentless rhythm that matched the quiet pulse of the house. She sat cross-legged on the worn linoleum floor, hands resting gently on the rigid limbs of her husband, tracing the familiar contours of bones that no longer obeyed him. His eyes were open but empty, staring past the walls in the rain, as if he had wandered into a world she could not follow. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic, lingering from the weekly nurse visits, mixed with the earthy musk of damp wood from the storm outside. She had learned to navigate the house like a careful tightrope walker, stepping softly over puddles on the floor, adjusting the blanket that never quite covered him, whispering words she hoped might reach him somewhere deep inside. For 5 years, this had been their rhythm, quiet, unbroken, heavy with both love and despair. Yet in the spaces between her fingers and his skin, there was another presence, equally constant, equally vigilant. The German shepherd, her police, trained companion, prowled the edges of the kitchen like a shadow with heartbeat. His coat glistened faintly with the rain that had followed her in when she returned from running errands. He padded silently, ears flicking toward every creak of the house, every subtle change in temperature or scent. She had named him Titan when he was a puppy, but he had grown into his name in more ways than she could have imagined. Guardian, sentinel, interpreter of the unspoken. Tonight, though, he was different. She noticed the tautness in his muscles, the way his eyes locked on corners that had always seemed empty, the low, insistent whine that pressed at her nerves with a strange urgency. At first, she tried to dismiss it. Dogs were sensitive, yes, trained to detect the subtle tremors of fear, the scent of danger. But she had become so accustomed to living in a house where silence and stillness were the only companions that even the faintest disturbance felt foreign. Titan pressed his warm body against her knees, tail flicking, eyes wide and focused, then darted toward the far corner of the room. The faint smell reached her before her mind could process it. Metallic, sour, something beneath the surface that made her stomach twist. She bent down, heart hammering, and followed him instinctively. The dog's nose brushed against the floorboard, then the wall, then circled her husband's bed as if tracing an invisible line that only he could see. "What is it, boy?" she whispered, though her voice trembled. The dog answered with a low growl, not aggressive, not threatening, but insistent, a sound that demanded attention, that forced her to recognize a truth she had been too afraid to face. For 5 years, doctors had waved away her concerns, explaining away grimaces, twitches, labored breaths. "It's nothing," they had said. "He's stable." But Titan was telling her otherwise. His gaze met hers, intelligent, unwavering, and in that moment she realized he knew something she didn't. The rain intensified, hammering against the window like a percussionist gone mad, and she felt a sudden, sharp awareness of the fragility of everything around her. The floor beneath her knees was cold, slick, and she could feel the chill climbing through her clothes into her bones. The dog sniffed again, head tilting, and pressed closer, pawing gently at her shoulder, nudging her toward the wall. The smell, faint, almost imperceptible, clung there, and she recognized it from some half-remembered detail, something buried in her fog of exhaustion and long nights. It was a warning, a signal that life had been slipping through her fingers unnoticed. Titan had sensed it first. Her mind reeled as she crouched beside him, tracing the contours of his face with trembling fingers. She had loved this man for decades, had promised to stand by him in sickness and in health, and yet she had been blind to what was really happening. The dog whined again, louder this time, a sound that echoed through the small, cramped house like a clarion call. She closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing, feeling the weight of 5 years pressing down like the storm outside. Titan leaned into her, warm and grounding, offering the steady heartbeat of loyalty and instinct against the chaos she could not yet name. Minutes stretched like hours as she followed him around the room, watching him circle, sniff, and nudge, every movement precise and urgent. The rain outside blurred into streaks of silver light, reflecting off the tiles and the thin layer of condensation on the windows. Every detail of the room seemed sharper, heightened. The slight groan of the floorboards, the faint drip from a leaky faucet, the soft hum of the heater that struggled against the damp cold. She realized she had been living in a bubble, where devotion and care had become routine, almost mechanical, while danger had crept silently, unnoticed, under their noses. Titan had broken that silence with nothing more than instinct, presence, and unshakable focus. She knelt beside him, brushing the dog's ears softly, murmuring words she barely understood herself. "Thank you," she whispered, voice breaking, as Titan leaned his massive head against her shoulder, eyes softening but never leaving the corner he had marked. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of hope mixed with terror, a recognition that salvation sometimes comes not from human hands but from those attuned to senses we cannot comprehend. He had been watching, waiting, protecting, and now he was guiding. The night pressed in around them, rain turning to a steady, soft drizzle. Shadows from the trees outside stretched long and dark across the floor, and the smell, the faint, alarming scent Titan had found, lingered like a secret waiting to be uncovered. Her fingers traced the dog's fur, feeling every ridge of muscle, the warmth of his body, the calm persistence in his gaze. In that moment she understood that he was more than a companion. He was a sentinel, a bridge between the world she could navigate and the hidden truth she could not see. Titan whined once more and nudged toward the bed, then toward the corner of the room, pawing insistently at the space beneath the faint glow of the bedside lamp. She took a deep breath, heart hammering, and moved toward the same spot, realizing with a jolt that she was about to discover something the doctors had missed, something that might change everything. The house, the rain, the dim light, the smell of damp earth and antiseptic, it all became a stage for revelation, for the unspoken bond between human and dog, for the quiet heroism that had been sitting with her all these years. As she crouched lower, following Titan's guidance, the weight of the past 5 years pressed on her chest, but it was tempered by a fragile, fragile hope. In the low, trembling whine of her dog, in the warm presence of his fur against her hand, in the way his eyes never left hers even as he pointed toward the unseen, she felt a surge of certainty something had been hidden from her, but not from him. And if Titan had noticed it, then maybe, just maybe, there was still time. The rain had softened to a whisper against the windows, leaving the house drenched in the damp scent of earth and cold air. She followed Titan as he moved with deliberate purpose, his paws silent on the floor, eyes sharp and unwavering. Every instinct in his body was tuned to a single point, the corner of the room where the faint metallic tang lingered. A scent she could barely perceive, but that gnawed at something deep inside her. She felt her heart clench with a mix of fear and anticipation, a tethered thread of hope pulling her forward, though her mind raced with questions she had long tried to ignore. "Show me," she whispered to the dog, voice hoarse from years of quiet endurance, and Titan responded with a soft whine, circling again before nudging toward the wall. He pawed at a spot just above the baseboard, sniffing with an intensity that made the hairs on her arms rise. She bent closer, her fingers hovering over the surface, and caught a subtle dampness, almost invisible in the dim light. Her stomach twisted. Something had been wrong here. Something small enough for human eyes to miss but persistent enough for a dog's senses to catch. Memories flooded her. Fragments she had tucked away in the quiet desperation of caregiving, the faint shiver he had sometimes felt in his fingers, the tightness in his chest that she had attributed to cold, the moments when his breathing would hitch just so. Doctors had reassured her each time. "He's fine," they had said. "It's part of recovery." And she had believed them, because what choice did she have? But Titan, with his low growl and insistent pawing, refused to let her settle. The dog's behavior was a mirror, reflecting the truth she had avoided. Something was not fine. She knelt beside him, tracing the line of his nose as he circled, trying to read the invisible trail that led to the corner. "What is it?" she murmured, voice trembling. Titan barked once, short and sharp, then sniffed the spot again before looking up at her, eyes wide and expectant. The intensity of his gaze was unnerving, almost human in its clarity. She felt a surge of both fear and relief. He had found it. The dog had discovered what human hands, human eyes, and human minds had overlooked for years. The smell grew stronger, more insistent, and she realized it was coming from beneath the floorboards. She could see it now, a faint discoloration, a moisture she had never noticed, a tiny, hidden corner that had escaped every examination, every sweep of a doctor's practiced hands. Titan's paw pressed gently against the spot as if urging her to acknowledge it, to see it for what it was. She swallowed hard, feeling a rush of emotion so raw it made her eyes sting. Gratitude, fear, anger at the years lost, hope, all tangled together in a tight knot that pressed against her chest. She rose, taking a step back, and Titan mirrored her, stepping close, protective and patient. The house seemed to hold its breath, the shadows of furniture stretching long in the dim lamplight, rainwater dripping rhythmically from the eaves. Every sound was amplified. The soft scrape of Titan's claws on the floor, the faint creak of the ceiling, her own shallow breaths. The dog's nose twitched, sensing movement beneath the surface, signaling that the danger had not yet passed. He whined softly again, pressing against her leg, insisting she follow him further, deeper into the layers of the room, the house, and the hidden truths it had concealed for so long. She remembered the countless nights she had spent by his side, watching his chest rise and fall, tracing lines on his skin, trying to feel the rhythm of his heart beneath the paralysis. Each time a new specialist had visited, she had voiced a small concern, a subtle suspicion, only to be met with professional detachment, clipped reassurances, or gentle dismissal. Now, as Titan pawed at the corner, nose pressed to the faint scent, she realized that the dog had been watching all along, noticing the details she could no longer perceive in herself. His loyalty was unwavering, his instincts precise. He had become her eyes, her guide, her warning system in a house that had been silent for too long. She crouched again, leaning close, fingers brushing the damp surface, feeling the chill of what had been hidden. The smell was stronger here, unmistakable, a slow, creeping infection, a hidden threat that had escaped every medical scan, every test, every human check. Her stomach churned at the thought of what could have happened if Titan had not been there, if instinct had failed where science had overlooked. She pressed her hand against the dog's head, feeling the heat of his fur, the gentle rhythm of his breathing. "You saved him, didn't you?" she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Titan nuzzled her hand, steady and calm, and she understood without words. He had saved him. The night stretched, tense and unbroken, as she and Titan inspected the corner together. He circled again, sniffed again, and barked softly, as if satisfied with his discovery, as if the world itself had shifted slightly on its axis and they had glimpsed a truth others could not see. She felt a surge of awe, a recognition that love alone had not been enough. Sometimes salvation came from instinct, from a life attuned to subtleties humans could not detect. The dog's presence was both a comfort and a revelation, a living, breathing bridge between danger and safety. Hours passed like minutes as she stayed crouched beside him, watching, learning, listening. The rain outside had slowed to a soft drizzle, casting a silver sheen across the floor, highlighting every shadow, every speck of dust, every tiny movement of fur and whiskers. Titan pressed against her shoulder, eyes bright with awareness, tail brushing against her arm. She realized the full weight of what had occurred, 5 years of quiet suffering, of careful vigilance, of unheeded signs. And a dog had noticed first. His loyalty had pierced the fog of human error, and now, finally, she could act. With a trembling hand, she reached for her phone, fingers wet with rain and sweat, and dialed the doctor's number. Titan nudged her, resting his head against her chest as she spoke in clipped, urgent sentences, describing what she had found, what he had revealed. She felt the tremor in her own voice, the mixture of fear and relief, hope and exhaustion, but Titan stayed close, grounding her, anchoring her to the moment, to the truth that had been hidden for too long. The doctor's voice was calm but sharp on the other end, acknowledging the gravity of the situation, instructing her to prepare for immediate action. She looked down at Titan, eyes shining, and whispered a shaky, grateful laugh. "You've been watching all this time, and you never let me miss it." The dog leaned into her, ears flicking, tail thumping softly, and she felt the extraordinary weight of loyalty, instinct, and love all wrapped in fur and muscle. In that moment, the room seemed to exhale with them, shadows softening, the rain outside fading to a whisper, and a fragile sense of hope taking root in the long, heavy silence that had once suffocated them. Titan had not just saved her husband, he had saved her from despair, from helplessness, from the quiet, creeping weight of years lost. As she settled beside him once more, brushing his fur and letting the warmth of his body press against hers, she felt something she had not allowed herself to feel in years' certainty. Titan knew. Titan had always known. And now finally so did she. The night held its breath with them, patient and silent, and for the first time in a long time she felt ready to follow. To act, to trust in the instincts that had carried them this far. The morning sunlight slanted through the blinds, cutting the dim bedroom into stripes of gold and shadow, but she hardly noticed. Titan had been awake for hours, pacing in measured circles, ears flicking at every faint noise, nose quivering with the precision only a trained police dog possessed. She sat on the edge of the bed, heart pounding, following his gaze as he sniffed along the baseboard, then the floor, then the faint gap beneath the nightstand. His body was taut with purpose, and she realized with a shock that he was not merely curious. He was hunting. Something lay hidden here, something the human eye had long ignored, something small yet dangerous enough to have threatened the life she had spent half a decade protecting. Her hands shook as she lowered herself to the floor beside him, brushing the fur along his back and feeling the vibrations of his muscles under her fingers. Titan's tail thumped softly against her leg, a metronome of reassurance, of guidance. She had grown accustomed to his presence as a comfort, a living heartbeat in a house that had long since fallen silent. But now she understood that his vigilance had a sharper edge. He had found the invisible, the overlooked, the lethal. The dog's nose twitched again, ears pivoting sharply, and he padded toward the corner of the bedroom she had always assumed was safe. He pressed his snout to the floorboards, sniffed with deliberate intensity, and barked softly, a staccato signal she had learned to read. She leaned closer, tracing the faint discoloration along the floor, noting the subtle dampness that had never been there before. The smell, faint, chemical, metallic, lingered in the air like a ghost. Her stomach twisted as she realized that this was not a minor issue, not an accident of neglect. This was something creeping beneath their feet, unnoticed by every human hand that had tried and failed to protect him. Memories she had long buried rose in a torrent. She saw flashes of his small grimaces when he shifted, the subtle flinch when nurses adjusted his body, the occasional hitch in his breathing that doctors had dismissed with a clinical shrug. 5 years of warnings ignored, of instincts dismissed, and yet now, here, with Titan at her side, it all coalesced into a single, horrifying truth. They had been teetering on the edge of disaster, and the dog had noticed first. His bark was insistent, urgent, and she felt her pulse quicken in tandem with his. "Titan, what is it?" she whispered, voice trembling, and he answered with a gentle nudge, pressing his head into her chest, eyes wide and unwavering. She felt a surge of both fear and trust. He had always been precise, intelligent beyond the comprehension of casual observers, and now she had no choice but to follow him, to trust the instincts that had saved them before. The gap beneath the floorboard beckoned, subtle yet undeniable, a portal into the hidden danger the world had ignored. Kneeling, she traced the edge of the board with her fingers, feeling the faint warmth of something beneath the surface, something alive in the quietest sense. Titan whined softly, pacing a careful circle, then returned to nudge her shoulder, eyes imploring. It was an unspoken command: move, investigate, discover, and so she did, sliding a small screwdriver from the drawer, gently prying the edge of the board upward. The smell grew stronger, pungent now, undeniable. A slow, creeping infection, silent but lethal, lying in wait beneath the wood. Her breath caught in her throat, a mixture of horror and awe. The dog had found it, sensed it, and guided her to the revelation she had long feared but never dared to articulate. Her fingers shook as she lifted the board, revealing a subtle discoloration, a shadow of moisture, the telltale sheen of something that had festered in secrecy. Titan leaned close, nose brushing the edge, eyes never leaving her face, tail swishing with the rhythm of his intent. She felt tears prick at her eyes, not just for the danger, but for the realization that they had been so close to losing him, and that this creature with no words, no human education, had been their protector all along. Gratitude, relief, and a deep, piercing awe surged within her. The room seemed to shift around them. Light streamed brighter through the blinds, the rain outside now a memory, and every shadow, every sound, Every movement of fur and floorboard seemed heightened, charged with the significance of discovery. Titan's ears twitched as she examined the floor, his body tense, ready to react if needed, guiding her with instinct and loyalty. She had spent 5 years caring for a man whose body had betrayed him, whose life had teetered on fragile threads, and now she realized the breadth of what she had relied upon. Not just her devotion, but the dog's intuition, the unwavering intelligence that could sense danger where humans could not. She pressed a hand against Titan's neck, feeling the warmth of his fur, the quiet steadiness beneath her fingers, and whispered, "You've been protecting us all this time." He leaned into her, as if understanding every unspoken word, tail flicking softly against the floor. In that moment she understood fully that love alone, though powerful, had limits. Sometimes survival demanded something beyond human care, something instinctive, acute, unerring. And that something had lived with them in the form of fur, muscle, and devotion. Her thoughts shifted quickly, racing ahead: the hospital, the tests, the specialists who had dismissed subtle signs. She felt a surge of urgency, of responsibility, and yet also an odd, bittersweet relief. 5 years of fear and uncertainty had culminated in this moment, and the dog had been the thread leading her through the darkness. Titan barked once, short and sharp, breaking through her spiraling thoughts, and she took it as confirmation. Yes, now we act. She gathered her courage, hands trembling, and called the doctor. Titan remained at her side, head pressed to her knee, eyes bright and alert. She described what they had found, her voice tight with emotion, the words spilling out in a mix of fear, gratitude, and urgency. The doctor's tone was sharp, practical, finally acknowledging the severity she had feared, and instructing immediate evaluation and treatment. She nodded, glancing down at Titan, who whined softly, sensing the tension and the relief coiled together in her chest. Minutes later she knelt again beside the spot, tracing the edges, inhaling the faint chemical scent, and feeling Titan press against her once more. The dog's loyalty, his instinct, his unwavering intelligence. They had guided her through the murky, uncertain waters of 5 years' worth of oversight. Her chest heaved with a mixture of exhaustion and relief, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. She had been blind, but he had seen. She had feared the worst, but he had ensured the best. The sunlight shifted, now brightening the edges of the room, highlighting dust motes suspended in the air. Titan's fur glinting with gold in the streaks of light. She pressed her cheek against the dog's head, feeling warmth, life, and protection all in one living, breathing creature. For the first time in years, she felt a clarity that had been impossible before the danger had been found, the threat identified, and survival was now within reach. And it had all been because of him. Titan nudged her again, low and insistent, and she rose, breathing deeply, heart racing with a mixture of adrenaline and gratitude. This house, once a quiet cathedral of despair, now felt alive, charged with purpose, awareness, and the unshakable certainty of loyalty. Every creak of the floor, every shadow in the corner, every detail of the familiar room was infused with new significance. She had learned, once again, that life often hinges not on human diligence alone, but on the instincts of those who watch, who protect, who guide silently and without expectation. As she stood there, Titan at her side, tail brushing against her leg, she whispered softly, "We're gonna fix this, together." The dog's ears flicked, eyes bright, and she understood that he had already been guiding them for years. Not just protecting her husband, but preserving hope, vigilance, and the fragile thread of life itself. In that quiet, sunlit room, with shadows retreating and warmth flooding in, she felt the first real weight of relief in half a decade. And she knew, deep in her bones, that Titan had uncovered more than danger. He had uncovered truth. The early morning light barely penetrated the clouds, thick with the aftermath of yesterday's storm. But she didn't notice. The air was taut with urgency, adrenaline coursing through her veins as Titan's paws drummed a steady, insistent rhythm on the floor. The German shepherd had been restless since dawn, pacing with precision, ears flicking at every sound, eyes sharp and unblinking. His instincts screamed danger, and she felt it too, coiling around her chest like a weight she could not shake. For the first time in years, the quiet vigilance of their home had shifted into action. They had discovered what human eyes had missed, and now there was no time to wait. Her husband lay in the bed, still and fragile, pale in the early light, a silent witness to the storm of urgency around him. She brushed his hair back, feeling the rigidity in his limbs, the slow rise and fall of his chest. The faint lines of pain etched into his face made her stomach twist. "We're getting help," she whispered, voice low but determined, and Titan whined softly, as if agreeing. The dog nudged her hand with his nose, pressing insistently toward the door, guiding her to move, to act, to carry the years of fear and helplessness into motion. She lifted him gently, the careful choreography of 5 years of caregiving guiding every motion, and Titan flanked her side, nose occasionally brushing her leg, tail sweeping the floor in a metronome of reassurance. The storm outside had left the streets slick and shining, the reflection of streetlights shimmering in puddles like fractured glass. Every sound was amplified: the whoosh of tires over wet asphalt, the faint cry of a distant bird, the subtle whine of Titan's paw against the car floor. The dog remained alert, scanning every corner, every shadow, every scent, ensuring nothing would interfere with the fragile thread of survival they carried. The ride to the hospital was a blur of rain, slick streets, the car's wipers slicing through the drizzle, each pass revealing a world half, hidden in shadow and reflection. She gripped her husband's hand, heart hammering, eyes darting between him and Titan. The dog sat rigid, head swiveled toward the corner of the seat, ears twitching at sounds invisible to her, tail flicking in silent calculation. She had learned over the years that Titan sensed more than humans, felt danger where her own instincts had dulled, and now his vigilance was the anchor keeping her focused, calm, and precise amid the storm of fear. At the hospital, chaos unfolded in a controlled surge of urgency. Nurses rushed, machines beeped, and doctors moved with a rhythm she barely understood but instinctively knew to follow. She explained quickly, her voice trembling but firm, recounting the discovery, the faint metallic scent, the creeping infection, the invisible danger that Titan had revealed. The medical staff reacted with a mixture of surprise and immediate action, confirming the hidden peril that had lurked unnoticed for years. And through it all, Titan remained at her side, body tense but unwavering, eyes bright, every muscle coiled with readiness, tail swishing in quiet alertness. Time stretched thin, each second a drumbeat of anxiety. Her husband was wheeled away, Titan following close, head occasionally brushing against her leg, a constant reminder that they were not alone. She watched monitors flicker, felt the hum of machinery, the antiseptic tang that had become familiar over the years, the faint warmth of Titan's body pressed against her side. The dog's presence was grounding, a tether to the life they had preserved together, a bridge between the terror of possibility and the fragile hope of survival. Doctors moved swiftly, confirming the hidden infection Titan had sensed. They explained procedures, risks, recovery timelines, but her mind was partly elsewhere. Following the precise, intuitive movements of the dog at her side, Titan's nose twitched, ears pivoting, and she realized that while machines and medicine could treat the body, it was instinct, loyalty, and attentiveness that had guided them here. She felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, both in gratitude and in awe of this creature who had become more than a companion, a guardian, a sentinel, and now, the herald of hope. Hours passed in a blur of sterile hallways, whispered consultations, and soft, measured beeps from monitors. Her husband, pale and fragile, underwent treatment, each procedure a battle against time and the silent danger the dog had discovered. She held Titan close during moments of waiting, stroking his fur, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing, his body tense but unwavering. He had saved him, had guided her to notice what humans had missed, and now, as they waited, she realized the depth of his devotion, his intelligence, and the extraordinary role he had played in preserving life. At one point, she sank onto a chair, resting her head against Titan's flank, the warmth and reassurance of his body a balm to her frayed nerves. The hospital's fluorescent lights flickered softly, the antiseptic air thick with the hum of life and machines, and she felt the weight of 5 years of silent caregiving, of ignored signs, of near misses, press into her chest. And yet, Titan remained calm, alert, present, a reminder that vigilance, instinct, and love could coexist in ways humans often overlooked. When the doctor finally emerged with news that the treatment had stabilized her husband, relief washed over her in a wave she could barely contain. She sank to her knees beside the bed, Titan pressing his head against her shoulder, tail flicking softly. Her husband's eyes fluttered open, small movements returning, fragile yet undeniable, and she felt a raw, overwhelming gratitude, not just for survival but for the unseen hero who had guided them here. Titan looked up at her, eyes bright, intelligent, and patient, as if saying without words, "I told you. I knew." That night, back in the hospital room, she watched her husband rest, the lines of pain and worry softening, breathing steady and even. Titan lay at the foot of the bed, ears flicking at every sound, body coiled in gentle vigilance. She realized that while the doctors had treated the body, it was the dog's instincts, intuition, and unwavering loyalty that had discovered the danger in time. Every year of quiet observation, every whispered whine, every insistence to investigate, had culminated in this victory, in this fragile, tenuous survival. As she brushed Titan's fur softly, the rhythmic sound of her fingers sliding through his coat mingling with the distant hum of monitors, she understood the enormity of what had occurred. 5 years of caregiving, vigilance, and quiet fear had led them to this moment, and the dog, the living embodiment of instinct, loyalty, and courage, had been at the center of it all. She pressed a gentle kiss to the top of his head, murmuring, "You saved him, you saved all of us." Titan's tail thumped softly in acknowledgement, eyes bright and unwavering, and she felt an extraordinary, quiet connection. The bridge between fear and hope, danger and safety, human and animal, had been built on instinct, trust, and devotion. In that hospital room, filled with the sterile light and soft beeping, she finally allowed herself to breathe. She felt the tension of years dissolve slightly, replaced by gratitude, awe, and love that transcended words. Titan lay close, ears flicking, nose occasionally brushing her hand, a constant reminder that heroes sometimes come on 4 paws, guided by instincts humans often dismiss. She realized that survival, love, and hope were not always in human hands alone. Sometimes they came with fur-keen eyes, and the unwavering heart of a dog who refused to ignore danger. And as she settled against him, exhaustion finally tugging at her eyelids, she knew one undeniable truth. Titan had not just saved her husband, he had saved their family, their future, and in the quiet, unwavering language only he spoke, he had saved her heart as well. Sunlight poured gently through the half-open blinds, soft and golden, bathing the hospital room in warmth that felt almost sacred. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic, mingled with the lingering scent of rain and the subtle musk of the German shepherd lying faithfully at the foot of the bed. Titan's coat glimmered in the light, each strand catching the sun like threads of gold, and he lay with quiet vigilance, ears twitching at every distant sound, tail brushing lightly against the floor. She sat beside him, hand resting on his head, feeling the warmth of his body and the steady pulse of his breathing. For the first time in years, she allowed herself a deep exhale, a release of tension that had gripped her chest for half a decade. Her husband stirred slightly, fingers twitching, then slowly flexing. She reached out, brushing her hand across his palm, feeling the fragile spark of life returning. His eyes fluttered open, dim at first, then clearing as recognition and faint relief washed across his face. He smiled weakly, the movement almost imperceptible, but it was enough to ignite a rush of tears down her cheeks. 5 years of care, worry, and silent endurance had brought them here, to this fragile, miraculous moment. And yet, she knew it was Titan who had carried them through the unseen danger, who had guided her when human instinct alone would have failed. The dog nudged her hand gently with his nose, pressing lightly against her palm, eyes bright and intelligent. She laughed softly through tears, a shaky, unsteady sound, and whispered, "You did this, all of this, you saved him." Titan leaned further into her, as if acknowledging the weight of her gratitude, tail sweeping the floor in quiet rhythm, every movement deliberate, patient, and loving. The bond between them, human and animal, protector and saved, felt palpable, as if the air itself held the memory of every warning, every nudge, every soft whine that had kept them alive. The doctors came quietly, checking vitals, adjusting equipment, murmuring reassurances. Their eyes for the first time reflected something beyond clinical assessment: respect, recognition, acknowledgement of the invisible guardian who had led them to safety. She watched Titan, alert but calm, ears flicking as he observed the humans, seemingly aware of their significance yet confident in his own role. She realized the truth she had known instinctively all along: love, patience, and human care were powerful. But the dog's loyalty, precision, and intuition had tipped the scales in their favor. He had acted when humans could not, sensing danger invisible to all else, a quiet sentinel guiding them through years of uncertainty. Hours passed, slow and tender, the soft beeping of monitors blending with the occasional rustle of nurses' steps and the faint murmur of conversations beyond the door. She brushed Titan's fur repeatedly, feeling the heat and strength beneath her fingers, marveling at the extraordinary life contained in his body and mind. Her husband's condition improved steadily, fragile movements becoming firmer, breaths steadier, the lines of pain softening as the day wore on. She leaned back in her chair, Titan at her side, and allowed herself to truly see them together. Her husband, fragile but surviving, Titan, loyal and unwavering. Herself, grateful and humbled by the extraordinary courage of an animal who had become more than a companion. Later, in the quiet lull of the afternoon, she guided her husband's hand to pet Titan, the gesture slow and tentative. The dog's ears flicked, eyes locking on his, a gentle acceptance passing between them. It was a silent conversation of trust, recognition, and gratitude. She watched as her husband's fingers traced Titan's fur, eyes shining with emotion, and she felt the weight of years lift, replaced with fragile hope, relief, and an almost reverent awe. Titan, for all his instinct, intelligence, and action, seemed content to simply be present, to offer his body and awareness as a shield, as a witness, as a steady heartbeat in the storm of life they had survived together. The hospital room grew quieter, filled only with the hum of machines, the faint rustle of sheets, and Titan's gentle breathing. She pressed her forehead against his head, whispering words of thanks and affection, realizing fully that he had not merely protected a body. He had preserved their shared life, the fragile, delicate thread of hope that had remained unseen for so long. Her husband shifted slightly, smiling weakly but genuinely, and she felt a rush of emotion so raw it nearly overwhelmed her. 5 years of worry, of devotion, of quiet despair had brought them to this sunlit moment, illuminated not just by light, but by loyalty, courage, and instinct. As evening approached, she wheeled her husband into a private room, a soft warmth filling the space. Titan followed, paws patting softly, tail sweeping the floor in measured cadence, eyes scanning, alert but calm. She watched him settle at the foot of the bed once more, ears flicking at distant sounds, breathing steady, posture relaxed but watchful. She realized something profound: survival, love, and hope often hinge on more than human endurance. Sometimes they require the quiet heroism of a being attuned to subtleties invisible to the human eye, a sentinel whose loyalty transcends language, reason, and expectation. Sitting beside them, she reached down to stroke Titan's head, feeling the warmth of his fur, the steady heartbeat beneath her palm. "We made it," she whispered, voice low, emotional, trembling. The dog responded with a gentle nudge, as if acknowledging her words and affirming that the battle was not hers alone, but theirs together. Human and animal, intertwined in a bond forged in crisis, trust, and love. The sun dipped lower outside the window, shadows stretching across the room, but the space felt illuminated with something deeper than light: gratitude, survival, and quiet, miraculous devotion. Night fell, but the room remained serene, infused with warmth, safety, and the soft, rhythmic presence of Titan. She leaned back, hand still resting on his head, and allowed herself to reflect on the journey. The 5 years of care, the near misses, the frustration with human oversight, and the uncanny precision of the dog who had guided them through it all. Her husband's fragile smile, his tentative movements, the warmth of the dog's body pressed against hers. All of it formed a tableau of survival, courage, and devotion that would remain etched in memory forever. She realized finally that life's miracles are often quiet, subtle, and unassuming. They do not always arrive with fanfare or notice. Sometimes they come on 4 paws, with keen eyes, a steady heartbeat, and instincts sharper than human perception. Titan had uncovered what the years of medical care had overlooked, had guided them to safety, and had reminded her that love, in all its forms, human and animal, is often the most powerful force of all. In the final moments of that day, she watched her husband drift into a calm, peaceful sleep. Titan curled at his feet, ears flicking occasionally, eyes bright but relaxed. She pressed a gentle kiss to Titan's head, feeling the warmth of fur and life beneath her fingers, and whispered softly, "Thank you for everything." The dog rested his head against her hand, tail sweeping slowly, the soft rhythm of his body a living testament to courage, loyalty, and the quiet miracles that exist in the unseen corners of our lives. And as the sun finally disappeared beyond the horizon, the room bathed in the soft glow of evening lights, she understood fully they had survived, not by chance, not by human hands alone, but because Titan had seen what others could not. The German shepherd had been more than a companion. He had been a guardian, a teacher, a bridge to life itself. And in that serene, golden twilight, the 3 of them, husband, wife, and dog, sat together in quiet triumph, bound by love, instinct, and the extraordinary miracle of survival.